Hey, everybody. Welcome back. This week, we're talking about signs. What are signs for? Who are they from? And what do they mean? I'm Carol. I'm here with Anthony and Tracy.
Hola.
Hey. Hey, hey. All right. Let's just start with signs. What are they? What do we mean by signs from spirit?
I was coming to this call and I came into the room and it was 0909 on the clock. And then it's cold here, so I looked at the temperature and it was 9.9 degrees. Why am I surrounded by 9?
It's a sign.
Is it a sign?
Yeah. Is it a sign? So, a lot of people think numbers are signs and they will get really excited with 1111s, 444s, things like that. Are they signs? That's what we're here to discuss. Repeating numbers. Why do we keep seeing those? So, I think people have different ideas about them. And my feeling is repeating numbers is spirit, someone in the spirit world getting our attention, but is it just a segue to get our attention to see more specific signs from our loved ones? Do repeating numbers actually mean anything? I think there's a variety of thoughts on that too, but I will hold off and see what you guys think.
Well, you might be sorry you asked because I don't think there's any rules. I feel like signs are so personal. And the one thing that came to mind was when I first started more seriously exploring this whole spirituality rabbit hole. Then I was like looking up, well, what does this number mean? And what the signs, like, for some reason in my mind, because I didn't know enough about it, but I was having those experiences. I thought they had to mean certain things and I had to look in a book or Google it to figure out what it was and get confirmation of what it was. And now I'm back to my own rebellious, weird self. I mean, the signs are aplenty and they're weird and wonderful and they mean a bunch of things. So for people, just general people that aren't maybe spiritual or they lost somebody and then they see a sign and it's a number, I don't think there's any rules. And I don't think, like, if you have a feeling with it that it means something, then I subscribe to it means something. Do the numbers have to mean anything specific? Well, if you want to feel that they do, then that's great. But I like to think of numbers or whatever sign it is as a nod from spirit. Maybe a past loved one, maybe a guide or an angel, whatever you subscribe to, but something bigger than ourselves, I feel.
Do you make a wish on 1111?
Sometimes.
You always see the 1111 signs and it's like make a wish. You know, like you even see it in advertising and it's used out in marketing and people have it as signs and they hang it around as decor in their houses. So like people are totally into repeat numbers, numerology, all of that. Like I love even, I'm not overly knowledgeable in numerology or anything, but I love like the numbers 3, 6, and 9 and how they always come back upon themselves. And like that just blows my mind. Like, and I love maths and and you see the pyramid of the numbers, like a 9 always comes back on itself. And I always feel something about the number 9 as well. So like that, we came in to do this podcast. We're talking about signs. I literally sit down at the desk and it's 9:09 on the clock. And then I look to the right, the temperature at night. I was, mother of Jesus, and surrounded by 9.
And you didn't know we were doing signs.
No, I actually didn't. I swear I didn't.
I'm always 2s and 4s, and my clock when you were talking right after I finished talking was 424, and I was like, oh, of course, So.
Yeah, I have to agree with Tracy about, I think the numbers, seeing repeat numbers can mean anything. And I do feel like, because I teach this and I get a lot of new students, they come in and they're very, very excited because a lot of times their introduction to noticing signs was seeing the repeat numbers. So then they want to know exactly what they mean, but I don't feel like there's an exact meaning all of the time. So sometimes I do feel like for myself, okay, I'll look at the numerology. So I find it interesting that Anthony saw 9s, which is a number of completion. And we are here to complete this episode. But at the same time, Anthony likes 9s. So maybe it's a wink and a nod from somebody in spirit for him. So feeling it in the moment.
Also, in astrology, the 9th house is a spiritual house. So 9 to me, like you're seeing it as completion, which it is in like the tarot, but it's a very spiritual number in astrology. So, like that's just a perfect example of how it could mean different things to different people.
Right. And it's also important to not lock ourselves into any one meaning, because then we might miss the sign for the meaning that it's meant to be giving us.
Yeah.
I like that you said earlier on looking up the numbers, Tracy, because then that maybe I used to do that, right? So let's say I wasn't into science before, and suddenly I start noticing these patterns, right? So I'm like, what the hell does that number mean? So you look up the numbers in different sources, and you'll get different meanings from them all, right?
Yeah.
So after a
Mhm.
while, I was like, no, this isn't going to work. So then what I started doing was feeling
Yep.
what any
Mhm.
sign or number meant to me. And it's funny that you said 9 is like spiritual. I'm not very much into astrology, as you know, but yes, 9 to me, what you said, Carl, you completion.
Mhm.
To me, then 9 is a very spiritual number. I don't know why that is. I just have that feeling around that
Yeah.
number.
Mhm.
And without knowing anything of what it is to do inside in astrology, you know?
Mhm.
Planets.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah. Stop. Now we'll be talking about Pluto.
Whatever happened to Pluto, right? You but what you're saying, it makes sense because it is like a gateway. It was a gateway for all of us to get and dig deeper into spirituality. And so we started with something that's pretty commonly known is repeat numbers because the 1111 thing, I knew it as a child. I don't know about you guys, but it was always, make the wish. It's even 111 we would accept. So we always started looking for that as a kid. And it wasn't until I'm older then I'm seeing different patterns. And I also love patterns, Anthony. So it caught my attention, the patterns. And as I'm looking them up, then that just makes me go down another rabbit hole of, well, where did they come from and what do they mean? And oh, wait, what are animal signs? It's just a whole different topic. But it started the ball rolling. And I think it does for a lot of people.
Yeah, I also think there's an aspect to it of when you are kind of like noticing maybe you're getting into your spirituality or whatever that means to you and having these ideas of afterlife or higher self or anything spiritual related. You almost are, I don't know, like a good majority of people grow up to where some things are accepted and some aren't. So seeing the numbers is more widely accepted. Like you'll see more on social media about it or, butterflies, like the common signs, quote unquote, are more widely accepted by people who aren't necessarily like fully into their spiritual, journey. And so they feel more comfortable. And so I feel like when you're starting that journey, you're more aware of those type of signs, maybe the standard signs, if you will, And as you continue on your journey and you open your awareness, you realize there's literally signs in everything and they can be weird and wonderful and just there's no box that they fit in really if you allow.
Just before you said signs and everything, I had the thought and I was like, oh yeah, but sure, like signs from different sources for different
Yeah.
reasons. And then Tracy says signs and everything, and I was like, obviously it's no surprise that as that thought pops into my head and Tracy's saying it at the same time.
Yeah.
But like, is it because remember where we were talking in the grief episode about signs from loved
Yeah.
ones, right? Or signs for guidance. So like, what are they? Who? Why? The 99. Is it from a loved one? Is it from our spirit guides? Is it from spirit just giving a wing?
Mhm.
That's open to interpretation too, right?
Yeah.
I think so. It's a feeling that you have along with it. Is this from a loved one? Because for me, I have certain signs from certain loved ones that I get, and so that does make me think of them specifically. But then I might see some other kind of synchronicity or something that strikes me as a sign, and I have to go, "Oh, I wonder where that came from." Is it somebody else in spirit that I haven't assigned a different sign to, or is it from a guide, an angel, whoever's out there for me? Is it a way to make me pay attention to something? And then that'll make me ponder, okay, well, what do I need to pay attention to right now? What would this mean to me? What does it draw my thoughts to? And I don't always have an answer. Sometimes I feel like it is just a, hey there, we're here and glad you noticed us. Yeah, keep looking.
Yeah, I heard somebody had mentioned to me, and it really feels true to me, that when you're getting more signs or whatever you perceive as signs, it's kind of a nod from God, the universe, however you want to frame that you're, within alignment or you're like in the right space of allowing yourself to be on your spiritual and soul journey. And so I like to think of it that way. Like what you said, Carol, I often wonder, like, oh, I got, a cardinal bird, but then I got this lizard thing. And there's so many different signs, right? But it's like, I know like who they're from, who I feel they're from at the time, but sometimes I don't. Sometimes it's a random thing. And to me, those ones are like a feeling of, okay, I'm on the right track. Like I'm right where I'm supposed to be. And so it's just like a comfort. Those kind of signs are like a comfort that I'm on the right track in my journey of life, you know? So I like that idea.
But I like that they cause you to check in with yourself.
Yeah.
And even with Carol, when Carol's talking, it's almost like, I was thinking, geez, signs make her become very aware, especially the ones that you don't attribute to someone, let's say that you loved in spirit, or there isn't a particular meaning assigned to it. Like you will often then speak about, oh, I think I got this sign. And then suddenly you can see thinking going around it and being more aware of other signs and are they connected. And I think as well as spirit would do that. Like, no one's going to suddenly show up, slap you across the face and say, I've been sending you signs for 6 months and you've been messing up. So I think that I like that they kind of make you aware and then they make you check in and, it's very personal like that. And I think that's right up Spirit Street, so to speak.
Well, because I do mediumship and read for people, sometimes I feel like it's signs from spirits that will be coming to a reading soon. So if you have an appointment with me the day or two before, I will notice something over and over again. And if I can't find a meaning to it for me personally, I'll say, I think that is going to be somebody who's coming to visit their loved one who is sitting with me. And I will use it in a reading. And pretty much people will take that sign. And I think, oh, that's cool. So it's another way of just enhancing my trust that the spirit world is there. They do exist and life does go on after life because I'm getting signs not just for myself, but signs for other people. And that's evidence for them. So I love the whole way it all intertwines.
Well, I love that spirit does that, knowing that you're aware enough to pick up signs that aren't even for you, but yet that they can pass to their loved one, but through you, obviously knowing then that the reading's coming up, right? So then you see how spirit can be creative.
And they know I like puzzles. so
they're playing with Carol and being creative.
They're like, oh, let's challenge her. She loves to think about things.
Who can trip her up today?
Oh, no, don't put that in the energy.
They can't anyway, because you'll always figure it
out. I'd like to think so, but not sure. So what do they mean exactly for just anybody else who's maybe not digging into this the way we dig into things? So somebody who's just kind of thinking about signs for the first time, what do they mean?
Well, I think it's going to be different for everyone, but I think as people, as we learn and grow on our life journey, I'd like to think we're aware as people that there's more than what's at surface level in a lot of ways, not just signs. And so I feel like when you become aware of signs or what you perceive as signs or a sign, I feel like it's just kind of like what I had mentioned before. It's like a nod to remind you that you're in the right place at the right time and you're doing a good job. Like I like to think of it that way. But equally, if you're in grief and it's somebody, and grief never goes away, right? So you carry it and there's, it ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's heavier than others, but those signs, like from your loved ones, for example, meaning to those, could just remind you of their essence and that they're still here and that they're like watching out for you. They still love you. They're there to support you. And it's funny because, I'll get really weird and wonderful and random surprise signs. I think those are really fun just when you need it. And because often that's a good topic as well. Sometimes you'll hear people like, well, I've been looking for the signs. I've been looking for the signs. So maybe we could talk about that because the more I look for them, the less I get. And if I just trust that they're going to come and just have that knowing that my people are there or that my guides are there or God is there, however you want to interpret it, I feel like that's when they happen. And, I think that that's really, really cool because signs crack me up. And I think like Joe, my hubby, he loves to send me stuff that makes me laugh because I can often be too serious. So You wouldn't know it by this conversation.
She says very seriously, yes.
So yeah. So I love the quirky, weird. Also, signs can like reflect people's personality. Like Carol had mentioned in another episode about her son sending the dragonfly to her, and it had big blue eyes, reminded her of her son. Well, like when Joe passed, he sent me we see lizards, and he always like would, catch lizards in the yard. And one time I was like out in the backyard and I was cussing at something because he wasn't there he used to do a lot of yard work. He wasn't there. And I turn around and I kid you not, the lizard is doing push-ups. And I was just like, that is the funniest sleep I've ever seen. And it got me out of my way and reminded me of like his personality, which always like when I would get serious or frustrated, he would always like make me laugh. And I couldn't believe it. I've never seen a lizard doing push-ups. So I thought, this is so bizarre. And this was shortly after he passed. And I had seen lizards because I kind of attributed them to him when he first passed. But it is a thing. Lizards actually do that. Like there's a thing to it. So, but I had never seen it. And that was just at the right moment when I was cussing at him because he couldn't do the yard work that I now had to do. And then I look over and I see this lizard doing push-ups. So, signs are awesome, and there's no rules with them. So I just think they're really cool. And I'm down a rabbit hole. So somebody else pick this up now. I lost the plot.
So lizards are a sign for you, but a lot of people have kind of the traditional signs that you talked about before with butterflies, dragonflies, coins are common, heart-shaped rocks or clouds. So I do think those are signs, and just because they're common doesn't mean that they aren't a sign from your loved one. Always when I get something like that, and a dragonfly is a common sign for me, I don't take just because I'm sitting near a body of water and a dragonfly goes by that it's necessarily a sign for that moment. It could be, but I also note that dragonflies live near the water, so it's not uncommon to see them. It's when they're kind of unusual or they do something where you're not expecting them. So for example, one day I was just driving down the road, not near any bodies of water, and a dragonfly flew across my windshield right in front of me at a stop sign. And I thought, well, that's random. And where did it come from? Where did it go? But it caught my attention. And I knew that was special at that time because that's not super common that I see a dragonfly go past the window. So for me, that's a time where it is a wink and a nod and a hello from my person because it's unexpected. And like Tracy, I'm just delighted by the unexpected.
I think a lot of times signs get ruined for people because they'll tell the story of the sign they received, and then somebody will be like, well, but it could be this or that. Or they'll ask somebody, do you think that was a sign? And somebody poo-poos it for them. And really, like, nobody can poo-poo it for you. Like, I think when people see a sign, pay attention to how it makes you feel, because that's going to tell you a lot. Like, you'll feel your person there, or you'll think of something, heartfelt or meaningful, or a memory, and don't let anybody talk you out of it. I mean, signs they're very personal in nature, I think.
Or yourself, right?
Yeah, or yourself.
Because that's what I can be bad for as well. And I always try and tell someone like that initial feeling you had, or that initial idea or even emotion towards the sign, like that is highly likely what is the case. It's that split second later then the skeptic voice comes into your head if you don't have someone else, as you said, Tracy, poo-pooing it on your sign or like shitting all over my sign. So like, no, they don't need to do it. I'll probably end up doing it myself first anyway if you're going to be somewhat skeptical. But that, I think everyone, let's say if you're going to suddenly open yourself up to spirituality and science, that's a learning curve that you learn to trust them. You learn to kind of trust that initial feeling that you had. And then it's even like you talk back to your own skeptic.
Yeah. I love that you bring up the trust aspect of that because, again, I think is part of that spiritual journey of knowing that there is more out there than just us. And it's kind of like the first step towards exploration and also being aware of what else is out there. So I think that's a great first step of Spirit sending us these things that make us trust like that. I wanted to also talk about, though, that Tracy's lizard, so not the typical sign. So signs don't have to be the coins and the flying creatures and anything like that. It can be a song that's special meaning to you? Sometimes I've had, like, I'll be watching a program or movie or something, and they say a line that strikes me, and I thought, oh, that's how so and so used to say that. So it can be something as simple as that. It can be just a random object of any kind that catches my attention, a watering
Yeah.
can. And then I go, oh, okay, what does that mean? So I don't want anybody to think that it can only be the typical thing, like ladybugs and such. It can be something very unique. Why not the crickets? I actually gave that as a sign to somebody one time in a reading. And she agreed with it because she said, oh my gosh, yes, we just had this random cricket yesterday and wondered where it came from. So yeah, creatures are common, but objects are too, I think. So be open to any
I
of
got a
it.
box of ho-hos as a sign once.
I think I need to hear that
And
story.
that was a whole thing with the box of ho-hos. So yeah. Yeah, there's no rules, anybody. There's just no rules.
I was going through my head before you said it. Now I know that I'm definitely right when I was saying in my head, no rules.
No rules.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. In mentioning no rules, I've heard like other widow friends or whatever be scared by the signs or fear-based, like if someone passes and then they have like a picture fall off the wall. So I think there's
Mhm.
something to be talked about with signs as interpreting them as negative, like, oh, I have a negative sign, I keep getting this and it means the devil, or I think that bears a little discussion too. So do either of you guys have any insight on that?
You said the word fear, and I'd be like a bull to a red flag. Say fear, because like I do hate anyone having fear over
Yeah.
anything. I want to dismantle that immediately if I hear someone talking about something that they're fearful about.
Yeah.
A lot of fear is based on your own narrative and chit chat that's going on in your head by yourself, to yourself. And I've never interpreted signs as a negative thing. So I actually was even surprised that you were mentioning that. And maybe that's just because I always say as well, like spirit comes from love. It's nothing but pure love. So like, there is no negative there. There is no badness. There is no evil. Just because you said devil, like that's a story for another episode.
Yeah.
You're staring
Yeah.
at that. But my whole point anyway is just that like someone has to have picked that up from
Yeah.
somebody else or talked themselves into
Yep.
that narrative.
Well, fear makes you feel unstable. Like when you're in fear and you don't know what's going on, you don't understand it. I think people get a lot of fear about things they don't understand. And so if they do get a sign and they don't understand it and they're in grief, I mean, there's a recipe for that energy to be misunderstood.
Mhm.
Yeah. So, Anthony, what would you tell somebody who comes to you and they're afraid of a sign? How do you rewrite the narrative with them?
Well, first I need to hear their narrative. And then usually you can start puncturing holes in the narrative. And not even in a bad way, like it's not like you're out to puncture holes. You just
Right.
speak an alternative interpretation of it. Or let's just say they constantly are seeing a sign with horns on it, right? And oh my God, the devil has horns. And so I keep thinking that the devil's following me around. I literally just made that up. Can we use that? Right? It could literally mean anything. But if they said that, oh, it's following me around, you would then get into a conversation like, who gave them that idea? And usually most people will come up with their own fear narrative. And because they keep that bent to themselves, like you said, Tracy, they might want to be judged or whatever it is. They keep to themselves, but they keep running over that narrative in their head. And actually, it's if you trust and share that with someone, let's say, who's not going to judge you, you can either get a friend or let's say go to a professional, right? There's always someone that you can speak to that's not judgmental. And the point is that you speak to them and tell them exactly how you feel so that you can break down the belief if it's limiting you in some way. And if you think that signs are negative, I think that's highly limiting. Because you being open to signs is almost telling spirit, I'm curious, I'm open to spirituality. And then spirit is like a child and will play with you and send you signs and keep you curious and interested and all of the happy stuff. Like never would send anything, let's say, that would make you fearful. Like those emotions just do not come from spirit. So if you ever have those emotions, they're the human getting in the way.
Yeah, I do think that social media influences the way people think or how they might fear something. Certain movies, ghost movies, books that they've read, et cetera, et cetera. can make people have preconceived ideas about a negative sign. But like you, I've never looked at them as negative at all. And guess what? I don't see them. So I'm not looking for them. So I don't see them. I look at everything in the positive sense. So that's what I see. So I'm not fearful of signs. It's also about just changing the way you look at things too. Just because somebody's told you devil's horns mean this or whatever your analogy was there, doesn't mean it's true. It goes back to, how do you really feel about that? And is this your own original feeling, or is it something you've heard or somebody's told you or you've seen it on a show somewhere? So it's important to look at it, like you said, where did that concept come from?
It often can come from trauma. I just know with the people that I've conversed with that have asked me about this kind of thing, there's usually like an underlying trauma, then that's a projection of that trauma. And they think it's a sign, and then they hook onto that because they're not worked through whatever this trauma is, maybe something they experienced through the death of somebody that they loved or just in general in their life. And, it's just like energy is always around. So if your focus is not worked through that and you're fearful, again, there's that word fearful of something, and your subconscious is trying to work it out, then you may be drawn to, the more negative aspects. I mean, that's the way I've kind of explained it to people. Just you can learn a lot by asking people questions, like, well, how does it make you feel? Or what were you thinking of when you got that? Or what happened recently in your life that you're going through? So like Anthony was saying, like, you can kind of reverse engineer it to get them to a better space with it. Because I think sometimes it's with religion too. Like there's a connotation on a lot of religions that you can't, it's just God, Jesus, and whatever. And you can't communicate with people after they pass. There's so many things. And when signs come into it and they're experiencing these things and then they hook a negative connotation onto it, I think as practitioners of what we do, and I just believe it's all love, like you. I've never really had that negative experience, except for when I was a kid. But again, I didn't understand it, right? So it goes back to not understanding and being afraid because of my upbringing and trauma I went through. So I just felt like that was a good part of the science conversation to have, because I feel like when people are kind of new at this and maybe they're going through grief and maybe they had suffered from a traumatic loss, like that has been brought up to me. So I just kind of wanted to talk about it a little bit.
I think fear is part of being human, and people always experience it in different aspects of their life in different ways. But like spirit never wants anyone to be fearful. So I would always think that like if you're seeing signs from spirit and that's fearful, that's always a sign that to work on yourself for self-development, right? Because the fear is coming from within you, not from spirit. And in actual fact, I would think spirit would be supportive in that. So if you kind of started changing the narrative within inside, and then we're opening yourself and saying, Spirit, show me alternative signs that actually contradict this belief that I currently have, and you're engaging in that conversation with Spirit. That to me then is being curious and opening up and not shutting down and being fearful, which is what I would encourage someone to do instead. And I love chatting to people. They tell their narrative, and I might just give an opinion or give an alternative. Like I get a warm feeling inside when I suddenly see the light bulb go off over someone's head because suddenly they've come up with an alternative narrative, or they suddenly see that they punctured holes in what they've been identifying with for so long.
Yeah.
But always that transformation comes from within them.
And it's changing the fear-based option to a hope-based option. One of my favorite movie quotes is from Shawshank Redemption, where they say, fear can hold you prisoner, hope can set you free. And I feel like if we come at looking at signs as from a perspective of hope, that will change the way we see and, like you said, perceive the signs that we're getting. So we have to change our own mindset. And hope changes everything. That's my tagline. Hope changes everything. Because if we have that, if we have the hope that our loved ones are still there, that we are still being supported, then it just changes the way we think about and perceive everything in our life.
Yeah. So I think something practical we can tell our listeners if they're having this experience and they are maybe afraid to talk to somebody about it, or they don't contact a medium or spiritual practitioner, is if you're somebody who is experiencing signs negatively in your perception, ask yourself some questions. Ask yourself, how is this making me feel? What in my life is happening right now that's negative? And is there something like in my childhood that could be tied to this? Because I think it is about some people have shame and they don't want to tell anybody, and then those things grow. So I think just practical advice, sit with yourself and ask you, like, what were you experiencing when this was happening? How is it making you feel? Have you felt like that in your life before this without a sign? You can kind of answer your own questions to get to more trust and understanding that it isn't a negative sign, it's just something else.
Our advice is look at signs from your positive perspective. Clearly, there's a lot to talk about with signs. We're not done yet. So thanks for joining us, and tune in next time for Signs, the extended version.
Cool. Extended cut.
Can't wait.
Bye. Bye.
Glad.